Do you believe in vampires? These enigmatic nocturnal beings that have stealthily crept into our myths and folklore for hundreds, if not thousands of years, hiding in the dimly lit corners of our imagination, biding their time to strike when we least expect it. They're etched into our collective unconscious, always lurking in the back of our minds, not quite visible, but never entirely absent either. But what is the story of these elusive entities? Where did our ancestors first come up with the concept of these bloodthirsty creatures whose presence has remained so omnipresent in our collective psyche? From where did the archetypal vampire first arise? And how has it managed to integrate itself so intricately into our culture, our nightmares, our movies, our literature, and our subconscious fascination with the macabre? These questions may seem simple, but they require a deep dive into the annals of history. A journey back in time to when mankind first started creating myths to explain the unexplainable, to keep the darkness at bay. This journey takes us back to a time before science and reason, where fear lurked in the shadows and where the vampire was born. What's more intriguing is the possibility that these supernatural beings, these creatures of the night, might still be living among us, hidden in our midst. Could they have survived through the centuries, adapting, evolving, becoming more cunning and more secretive? What if they are not just figures of our imagination, but real entities that have perfected the art of conceality? What if they walk among us in plain sight, their true nature hidden beneath a veneer of normalcy? The thought is as chilling as it is fascinating. The vampire mythology traces its roots back to ancient times, in cultures that span the globe. From the ravenous Rakshasas of ancient Indian mythology, who quenched their thirst with human blood, to the vampiric strigas of Greek legend, known for their nocturnal blood-feeding habits, the concept of a creature who sustains its existence by consuming lifeblood of the living is as old as civilization itself. These legends encapsulate the primal fear of the unknown, of death, of the darkness that lies beyond our understanding. The vampire is a testament to our eternal fascination with the unknown, an embodiment of our darkest fears and deepest desires. They are creatures that traverse the divide between life and death, existing in the shadows, forever lingering on the margins of our world. Their story serves as a reminder of our own mortality, of our primal fears and our fascination with the macabre. The story of vampires begins in ancient times, in cultures scattered across the globe. From the blood-drinking demons of ancient Indian myth to the strategies of Greek legend, the idea of a creature sustaining its life force by consuming the essence of the living is as old as civilization itself. Move forward a few centuries to Eastern Europe, in the Middle Ages, a period shrouded in mystery and steeped in folklore. This was a time of knights and peasants, of castles and cobblestone streets, of mystery, magic, and superstition. As the sun set each day, people huddled around their fires, whispering tales to each other. It was in this era that the vampire, an entity that continues to captivate our imagination today, started to take shape in the collective consciousness of the people. Stories circulated throughout the villages and towns, tales of the macabre and the supernatural. These tales spoke of the undead, beings who were neither alive nor dead, but existed in a tormented state of in-between. They were entities that were said to rise from their graves when night fell, creeping through the shadows to feast on the blood of the living, leaving their victims pale, lifeless, and destined to join the ranks of the undead themselves. The term vampire surfaced during this period. It was an amalgamation of various Slavic languages, each contributing to the formation of this chilling moniker. The word itself was whispered with fear and trepidation, a symbol of the horrors that lurked in the darkness of the night. The fear was so palpable that people started to take precautions, such as hanging garlic on their doors, windows, placing crosses in their homes, and conducting rituals believed to ward off these malevolent beings. As we delve deeper into the history of vampires, we catapult into the 18th century, a time that witnessed the peak of vampire hysteria across Europe. The fascination with these nocturnal creatures intensified, reaching fever pitch. Reports of vampire attacks were rampant, often carried by the wind from one town to the next, sparking widespread panic and fear. Vampire hunts became a common occurrence, a gruesome spectacle where suspected vampires were exhumed and their bodies desecrated in a bid to end their reign of terror. Many of these hunts were spurred on by outbreaks of diseases such as the plague. These diseases, which were poorly understood at the time, were often attributed to the work of these sinister creatures, further fueling the mass hysteria and dread. Fast forward to the 18th century, when the vampire hysteria reached its peak in Europe, reports of vampire attacks and vampire hunts were common, often spurred on by outbreaks of disease, which were poorly understood at the time and attributed to these sinister creatures. Then, the 19th century saw vampires transition from folklore to literature, with the publication of John Polidori's The Vampire, and of course Bram Stoker's iconic Dracula. This intriguing century was a pivotal time in the evolution of the vampire as a concept. Gone were the days of mere oral tales whispered at night, replaced by well-thought-out narratives penned by talented writers. The leap was significant, as the shift from folklore to literature allowed for a more detailed exploration of the vampire's characteristics, nature, and motivations. The introduction of John Polidori's The Vampire, published in 1819, brought a whole new perception to the vampire concept. The story was a compelling amalgamation of horror and seduction, giving birth to the modern vampire archetype. Polidori's vampire, Lord Ruthven, was brooding and melancholic figure, a far cry from the mindless, monstrous creatures of folklore. Following Polidori, it was Bram Stoker who further escalated the stature of vampires with his book Dracula. Stoker's Dracula was a character of immense power and charisma, a menacing predator lurking in the shadows, only to strike fear when least expected. This 1897 novel, still read and celebrated today, not only reinforced the vampire myth but also added a layer of sophistication and charm to these night creatures. Both these works combined laid a solid groundwork, defining and reshaping the image of the vampire in popular. The vampire morphed from a horrifying figure of the night into a sophisticated, seductive, as alluring as it is terrifying. This captivating image of the vampire created a paradoxical fascination, something that still remains intact in today's popular "What about today?" The concept of vampires has never ceased to intrigue the modern world. It continues to be a subject of discussion, research, and debates. There are those who claim to be real vampires, not in the sense of supernatural beings, but as individuals who have a need, psychological or otherwise, to consume blood. In the contemporary world, the notion of vampires has taken an entirely new dimension. It is no longer about supernatural beings hiding in the shadows. It is more about individuals living among us, albeit with unusual habits. These individuals, often referred to as modern vampires, claim to have an innate need to consume blood. They live among us, blending into society, and are cautious about not drawing attention to their unusual habits, are careful to maintain their anonymity to prevent the world from discovering their vampiric nature. Could vampires still exist among us? The answer may be more complex than a simple yes or no. As we delve deeper into the nuances of vampirism today, we find that the line between fiction and reality often blurs. As our culture continues to evolve, so too does the vampire myth. The question remains, how will it transform next? So what have we learned? That vampires, in one form or another, have been with us since the dawn of civilization. They've evolved from ancient demons to medieval undead, from the villains of folklore to the anti-heroes of modern literature. And perhaps they walk among us still, a hidden subculture in our modern society. But whether you believe in their existence or not, one thing is undeniable. Vampires, with their potent mix of horror and allure, will continue to fascinate us, to haunt our nightmares and our imaginations for centuries to come.